dominoes. You notice there's 3.
Put your tongue in your
dots,
mouth.
right?
But they're magnets.
Yeah, they're movable. Okay. Now, what you can do is you can set them up in 3 different ways. You can have 3 and 3. You can have 4 and 2. 4 on one side and 2 on the other. Or you can have 5 on one side and 1 on the other. I'm going to let my volunteer choose any one of those 3 ways and set up the spots that way. We don't count that. Okay. Now, the volunteer can choose any one of those 3 ways, and I'll prove that I knew ahead of time which way the volunteer was going to choose. And I'll prove that by showing you another domino that looks just like the one that he set up. However he set it up, I'll show you one of the same kind. 1 on that side, 2, 3, 4, 5 on one side, 1 on the other. Okay, now you want to see me show you another domino that looks just like that one? There you go. Well, that's a trick, I agree, but actually I knew about it because we set this up to have 5 on one side and 1 on the other, just like
But what if they put 4 there and 1 on the other?
Well, then I would have set this up differently, wouldn't I?
But how did you do that?
Okay, well,
That's magic.
that's the trick. That's why I paid $3 for this, guys. I mean, come on.
You had no choice.
Okay. Wait a minute, let's hold up the ghost
Okay,
trap
we have to
first.
get the ghost.
Oh, this is eerie.
There's the ghost.
Okay, there's one. Put them in there.
Here's the ghost.
Okay, Erin, do you have any ghosties?
Here's the ghost.
Erin's giving me some. Okay, I think that's enough.
Okay,
Now, are
there's
they gonna do something for us?
Eddie, do you want to do the floating gray switch? Here I come!
Erin, kill the ghosties!
Eddie, want a floating bracelet to go?
Well, the ghosts are all gone. I went to the store the other day to get my kids a coloring book. And I was so mad when I got home because the coloring book was blank. They hadn't put any pictures in it. Well, it was okay though, because I knew that if you read the name of the book backwards, that's magical and get the pictures to appear. So we said, Koob, Ganiralak, Kijam, Nufa. And when we looked at the book,
Now watch this.
But the problem was the kids were too lazy to color them. I waited and waited, and they wouldn't color them. So what I had to do finally,
Get out of the way, Dave.
I'll block the view for the camera, was I had to take the crayons in my hand and rub them into the book.
Gasp, gasp.
And then, when we looked at the book,
They were all colored.
all the pictures were colored.
I missed that. Could you flip that again?
Okay.
Erin's getting
All
it.
the pictures were colored.
Hocus pocus.
Focus, focus. You missed the magic trick. But the thing is, it was really all magic, because the pictures are really never there at all.
Hal is now playing harmonica. Let's see if the dogs notice.
My name is Hal Finney, and I'm making this recording for a few reasons. Mostly because I want people in the future to be able to hear my voice and maybe something of my story. I was diagnosed 6 months ago with ALS, and as a result, I will be losing the ability to speak, among other things. And so this will be an opportunity for me to talk, and I appreciate opportunity here to be recorded and to allow people in the future to hear me speak even when I can no longer do so. I was born in Coalinga, California, which is in Central California. My father worked his whole life for a Union Oil Company, and he started off working in some laboratory type position, I think, but he got into management and he rose up through the ranks of the company. But in order to do that, he had to agree to be transferred a lot in order to get experience in all the different parts of the company's operations. Now, I have two sisters, Kathy, who's 10 years older than me, and Pat, who's 15 years older than me. And my brother Mike is a year younger. So my older sisters had to move around a lot as my dad was transferred. Then when I was born, they were, as I said, living in this small town of Coalinga. But I don't remember it because when I was only 3 months old, my dad was transferred to southern Louisiana, a small town called Abbeville, not far from the Gulf Coast. And we lived there for 6 years. So those are really my earliest memories, and that's where my brother Mike was born. Get a lot of babysitting, particularly from my sister Kathy, who's 10 years older than me. Pat, by the time I can remember anything, was away at college, and then she got married right after graduating, and then moved away. Kathy was great. She was very, very patient with us, and always was really nice. Although I remember one time, this was when I was older, and we had some of our cousins were over visiting. They were all about my age, so Kathy was stuck babysitting all of us, and we just got too rambunctious. So she made us all go out in the backyard, just shut us out of the house. So my one cousin my cousin Kim made a sign. It was like a picket sign saying, "Kathy, unfair to children." And we all had signs and marched around in the backyard protesting her harsh treatment of us. But really, she was very patient, and I really always loved her and how she would help take care of us. Yeah, Mike is actually less than a year younger than me. Our birthdays are 2 days apart, so we are the same age for 2 days every year. And we were always very, very close growing up. Mike is quite tall for my family. He's 6 feet tall now. And as we were growing up, we were always about the same size. A lot of people thought we were twins when my mom would take us around. We got asked that a lot, whether the two boys were twins. But yeah, we were very close playmates. We always played together. We shared a bedroom until Kathy got old enough to move out. So we've had a lot of adventures together over the years. As I said, we grew up, and I spent my first years in southern Louisiana. Then we lived in Houston for 2 years, and then we moved out to the Los Angeles area where I went to one school for 2 years, and then basically stayed in the same area for a long time. It was 8 years, maybe. That was probably the longest time. Up until then, my parents had stayed in one place. One of the peculiarities of my youth is that I did not have a very high opinion of my own abilities. I was always very modest and really didn't think of myself as being particularly smart or unusual. I just thought I was more interested in certain topics than other people, but that was why I was better at those subjects, was just more due to interest than ability. sometimes I find a technical subject just becomes absolutely fascinating to me. In fact, fascinating is an understatement. Obsession would be a better word. I can't think about anything else. And it's just learning about this technology, particularly in terms of computers, because when you learn a new computer technology, you can immediately put it to work by writing the software to use it and to be able to do things you couldn't do before. So this has happened to me a number of times over the years. It's completely uncontrollable when it happens. And it's really good in a way in that I'm amazingly productive during these times. I can write an amount of software programs that would take a normal person months and months to write, and I can just do it in a few days because I'm so excited and driven and obsessed about it. Usually, fortunately, these episodes don't last more than a week or two, I guess I would say. But it's always been a kind of peculiar mental trait that I've had, that I do occasionally get these. And I do kind of treasure them, even though they've gotten less common over the years. But it's always been something unique that I've had. And that was a lot of what has made me decide to work with computers, because that is what I have done throughout my career. I started working for a small software company that was founded by a bunch of Caltech people, and mostly only employed Caltech people. And some of their main projects in those days were some of the very first video games for home video game players. So I ended up programming quite a few video games. And it's funny because there's actually a lot of people on the net still today who are collectors of those early video game systems. And to them, I'm kind of a mini rock star as one of the developers of so many of those early games. Apparently, they actually have conventions and everything. And I've been interviewed a couple of times by people who are into that field. So I only did it for about 4 or 5 years, but that's one of the lasting legacies of that early part of my work career. It's kind of funny. And it was really fun. In those days, nowadays, creating a video game, there's literally thousands of people involved in just one game. But back then, just 1 or 2 guys would do a whole game, start to finish. So I guess we were married about 3 years and decided to start a family. Is that about the time frame? We pretty much had this planned out and pretty much stuck to our plan. Everything worked well. Fran stopped working. We bought a house not far from my sister Kathy's house, just a couple miles away. And she had her son, Jason, in 1983. Jason was an early talker. That's the main point of the story. And about 9 or 10 months, he started talking and pretty quickly progressed to long sentences, not just 1 or 2 words like you would expect. we said Jason is doing a lot of talking, and he's really talking in sentences. So the pediatrician says, oh, really? Let's hear him say something. And he points to a picture on the wall. And he says, Jason, what's that? And Jason says, he's 1 year old, he says, that is a picture of a bird on wall. And he kind of talked like that, real slow and halting, but really long sentences. And the pediatrician was flabbergasted. He said he thought he might have said, picture or picture of bird, but he never seen a child at that age who would construct such a long sentence. And he said, in fact, he almost would have thought that we had somehow coached him to memorize that sentence, except he had made one small grammatical error in there. He'd said bird on wall instead of bird on the wall or something like that.
Yeah.
But, Jason was amazingly advanced boy. And really, all through school, he's been really, really smart. Jason did math contests as I had done. And he also did well in them as I did. But I enjoyed his so much more than mine because when I was in them, there was so much tension and pressure from trying to solve problems and so on. So it was hard for me to relax and enjoy them. And I was able to more. I always remember one contest Jason was in, and it was down in Ventura. It was for this whole area. And there had been a written test, and Jason got first place on the written test. And then they were going to have kind of a oral competition for the top 10 winners of the written tests, where they would give them questions as they were up on stage, and they would answer them, see who got the answer faster. So the number 10 and number 9 people went up against each other, and then the winner of that went up against number 8, the winner of that went up against number 7, all the way up. Well, Jason was number 1. He had got first place. So he had to go against the best person at doing these oral questions from all of the top 10, who was really good at that kind of thing. So finally he's up there on stage, and they give the question, and the other kids start scribbling furiously on scratch paper. Jason doesn't write anything. He just sits back. He just sits back and stares into space and comes up with the answer. And they had to do like 3 out of 5. Every question was like that. All through the whole thing. Everyone had written out what they were, all the problems. Jason did all of them in his head. And he won. And everyone was totally amazed. They'd never seen anything like that. And they all wanted to come up and meet him afterwards. And so I felt really lucky to have been there and seen that. So after Jason was born and got going pretty good, we had our second child, and that's Erin. So we had a boy and a girl. Erin was born in May 9th, 85. So she's about 2.5 years younger than Jason. That age was a little far apart, I think, for them to be really easy playmates. I was much closer in age to my brother, and we had always played a lot. But Jason and Erin, it seemed like they had a lot of trouble finding ways to play. They did play together a lot, but they had a lot of disagreements, it seemed like. Erin has always been very, in her own mind, she's very strong, I guess I would say, in her own mind. And as a young child, this came out as a real strong stubbornness. We had, a certain number of fights with her, and she was very strong-willed. But she used to like to kind of pretend to be invisible when she was really young. And she sort of mastered the art, and she's still good at it when she visits, of slipping through the house and getting from one point to the other without anyone seeing her. It's quite amazing. And I should say, when I was young, I used to do a little bit of the same thing. When I would get up in the morning, I would like to get into the bathroom and shower before anyone could see me. Erin seems like she's got that even more strongly. But yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. Erin was a good student, but somehow from like high school on, her report cards never made it home, even though they would mail them to us. Somehow they vanished. I guess she intercepted them somehow. So we had no idea how well she was doing in school. We were worried she was doing kind of poorly. So when it came time to apply to college, I encouraged her to not aim too high, to apply to some good schools, but some lower schools too, because I had no idea where she was coming from. And she did her SAT, and she got a 1590, which is one step from the very highest score possible. And I was amazed. It was like, I didn't know you were smart. So she got into every college she applied to, as it turned out. Fran and I were very permissive, you could say, as parents. We were not very intrusive into our children's lives. I guess that was kind of intentional. Maybe in retrospect you always wonder if you could have done it better. But, we felt like if each person owns their own life, and they kind of have to make their own way in life. And we were there to provide a structure, a framework, to provide support, to give them the opportunities to explore and do what they wanted to do. But we didn't really push them, and we didn't pry. I mean, we could have, a lot of parents would have demanded that Erin produce her report cards and things. It may seem strange that we just let it go like that, but that was really our philosophy, was that ultimately it's up to each person to find a way in life that works for them. Allow people to make their decisions, to respect them, and we love our kids more than anything. We do love our kids so much, and it's hard if you see them having hard times and so on, but we just try to respect the decisions they make and support them. You see parts of your personality in both of the kids, and certainly in Jason, but also in Erin. I felt often that her personality is a lot like mine. Erin, she's turned out pretty good. She went to college, and she also went into computers. She got a degree in computer science, and she's presently living with her boyfriend, who also graduated from the same college. They both went to UC Irvine, and they're both living up now in Denver. But Erin loved animals, and joined the 4-H club. And then we started having all these animals in our house. First it was a rabbit, then guinea pigs, and then she got chickens. And I forget why. I guess we had the chickens loose in our yard. Erin would let them come in the house sometime. We had dogs earlier, but they had died. The chickens learned to go through the dog door, so they could actually come in the house. And we had a rooster, as well as chickens. So our chickens actually laid fertile eggs. And one of them laid a clutch of eggs in our guest bedroom, brooded them, and hatched the chicks right there in the guest bedroom. And it was the most amazing thing. We had pictures of it. But that was all due to Erin. She really introduced us to some amazing experiences that we would never have had otherwise. She and I went on a trip together to San Francisco after she graduated from high school, I guess, or maybe it was while she was in college. And we had a really good time. Erin also really enjoyed skiing. I haven't mentioned much, but we've skied always over the years, and she and I have always been the main skiers of the family, and that was always something that we've done together and really enjoyed. About that time, I got started on what would turn to be the next phase of my career, which is a rather technical field called cryptography, which deals with basically scrambling data. And the main commercial application is to protect sensitive data on the internet from being stolen. So it's actually a very mathematical field and quite interesting, even as a theoretical, from the theoretical perspective, independent of its practical applications. But it's a field that really fascinates me for that reason. As I was describing earlier, the thing I always love is when there's an intellectual challenge that when you master it gives you practical abilities. And cryptography is an ideal field for that because the intellectual challenge is very great, but the practical applications are very useful and, in my opinion, quite amazing and counterintuitive. So as I started to learn about it, I was really interested. And I got involved with the guy who was developing a cryptographic software program for the internet. I started working with him. He lived in another state, but I would work on his program at night. He had created kind of a first version, but he needed a lot of improvements. And for some reason, he didn't want to do the improvements. He was trying to get other people to do them. And so I became that person. So after a couple of years of the software being continually developed and used, he decided to start a company to commercialize it and orient it towards the business market. So he hired me. At first, he wanted me to move up to the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley. That was where the headquarters were going to be. But I didn't want to leave Santa Barbara. The kids were in school, Fran was working. We really loved living here. So he finally agreed that I could work from home, live at home, work, do what they call telecommuting, and just travel up to there a few times a year. And that was in 1996, and I basically worked there ever since. It's been great. I can live at home. I work in cryptography, which is this field that I love, and I don't have to do too much travel. I have a lot of connections and respect within the field, and it's just been an ideal area for me. I've been really, really happy and satisfied working in that all these years. Well, starting about a year ago, I decided I was going to run a marathon. 2 years earlier, I joined Weight Watchers and I lost weight and I started exercising and I started running. And so I decided back then that I would try to run a half marathon, which is 13 miles. And at the time, that seemed like a nearly impossible goal. But I succeeded. I did run a half later that year. And I did a couple of more the next year. So I decided to set my sights on a full marathon. And last year, 2009, was going to be my year for that. I had mapped out a whole plan, and I'm confident that I could have done it. I started in January. I built up my running. By April, I was running more than 50 miles a week. I would go out on single runs of more than 20 miles in length. But I was starting to have some trouble. Fran noticed that my speech wasn't sounding right. I was rather annoyed, actually. She was nagging me about it, it seemed like. She would say I was sounding breathless. And I'd be like, well, we're jogging, of course I'm breathless. She thought I sounded hoarse. And finally, in May, I noticed my speech wasn't right. And not only with these things, but it was becoming blurred and slurred. Wasn't able to pronounce clearly. So I went to the doctor, and he referred me to the neurologist. We went through a lot of tests, all of which were negative. And finally, they had a test which was positive. So at first, I was really happy. Now we're going to get to the bottom of this. Unfortunately, this test indicated that I had motor neuron problems. And the worst case would be ALS. So he referred us to the ALS clinic at UCLA, which specializes in that disease. At first, we thought it was going to be okay. We met with them there, and the doctor said, "You don't look like an ALS patient." I was still running, and my speech was better than it is now, a little bit. So we were optimistic. But we came back for another test in August that he thought I might have a different disease. He did the test, and he said, "I'm sorry, this test indicates you do have ALS." So that came as a complete shock to us, because we really weren't expecting it. We met people with advanced ALS, so we know what lies ahead, but we're going to do our best to deal with it. I think as long as I can communicate in some form, even if it's just eye blinks, I'm going to be okay. I can live like that. My mind's, as long as the mind is still okay. People use the word soulmates. And I think for us it's more true than most. We've always felt that we came from very different backgrounds, but ended up in much the same place, philosophically. And we have a real partnership. So we view this disease as being one that affects both of us. We just have to maintain the partnership going forward. And I guess I would say thank you, except it seems like words aren't adequate. And it's more like I'm thinking of Fran as going to be part of me, the part of me that can move. And I just hope that it doesn't get too hard on her, that the work of caring for my body doesn't grow too heavy for her.
But I just want to assure Hal that it will never be too hard. As long as you're there, I will be there with you. Always.
My job is to keep going.
Yeah, that's Hal's job.
To stay there and to communicate as much as I can. And together we will be able to keep both of us going.
That's right.
I guess the advice I would give is reach out to other people and don't be afraid to ask for help and accept help. So many people resist the help of others, resist the use of assistive devices, and it's been a kind of a role reversal for me. I would say I used to be the leader of our family. I would do all the driving and make a lot of decisions, and now I delegate. Oh, that's how I think of it. I listen to other people and let the family help me, and I accept their help. And I think that works best because it brings everyone together as a team.